They say she arrived barefoot and burning with blood down her legs, and something carved into her palm. No one saw who she was running from, or what she carried in her breath. Chapter 1. How can you run from something that knew your name before you called it? Enemy. I didn't ask for a war. I was just a woman hanging laundry beneath a sky that hadn't decided if it wanted to rain or burn. My name is Clara Wren, and until that morning I thought I understood my life. Wife to Sheriff Thomas Wren, daughter of a preacher, a woman who ironed shirts, watered basil, and never raised her voice in public. The kind of woman men nodded at without really seeing. But that morning, the morning she came, I learned that silence can be a kind of violence. And that love, real love, sometimes arrives in the shape of someone running for their life. The girl collapsed at the far fence post just after sunrise. Id stepped outside with a basket of clean linens when I saw her, or rather, something too still to be an animal, and too twisted to be just a pile of cloth. Her body folded at the base of the cedar post like a prayer someone had dropped. She was barefoot. The soles of her feet blackened and split open like old leather. Her dresser, what was left of it, was the color of dirt and dried blood. She was maybe 15, maybe younger. I stood frozen on the porch. My first instinct, truthfully, was to look away. Go inside. Pretend I hadn't seen her. That's how we're trained out here. Trouble comes on horseback or bleeding, and if it doesn't knock, you don't open the door. But she looked up. Only one eye was open, the other swollen shut, but it locked on mine like a hook in the gut. There was no begging, no fear, just a kind of quiet defiance like she'd die before asking for help. I dropped the basket, crossed the yard in long, stupid strides. She tried to crawl away, elbows trembling beneath her. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Only a dry rasp, like wind through broken glass. Easy, I whispered, kneeling. You're safe now. That was a lie, but maybe lies told in kindness weigh less. She flinched when I touched her arm, but didn't pull away. Her skin was fever hot. Her collarbone jutted out beneath a raw welt. I slipped my arms under her, and she didn't resist. Light as a bird. Half there, half gone. As I lifted her, something hit the toe of my boot. A small, carved medallion smudged with blood. I bent to pick it up, slipping it into the pocket of my apron without thinking. Inside, I laid her gently on the horsehair couch and wrapped her in the buffalo hide we usually reserved for winter storms. She shivered even in the warmth. I didn't ask her name. I dabbed her face with a damp cloth, careful around the purple bloom on her cheekbone. One of her ribs was swollen, possibly broken. Rope burns ringed both wrists. Her knees were scraped raw. Whoever she'd run from hadn't meant her to live. I poured water into a tin cup and set it beside her. Then I went outside. My hands were shaking. The wind had shifted, carried with it a new smell, horse sweat, leather oil, and something sharper, like fear baking under sun. I scanned the horizon. South, just beyond the ridge, a dust trail slithered up from the canyon floor. Faint, but moving fast. I said nothing, just stood with my hand on the porch rail and my jaw tight. I'd always thought trouble made noise when it came, but this kind of trouble, it moved like a shadow. It let you invite it in. I stayed up for hours watching. She didn't wake until late afternoon. I heard her shift, followed by a sharp gasp. When I turned, she was sitting up too fast, clutching her side. You're in my home, I said, keeping my voice low. Nearest doctor's, 2 towns over, and half drunk by noon. I did what I could. Her eyes scanned the room. She spotted the rifle in the corner. The back door. Me. You with him? She asked, voice dry and cracked. Who Preston Hale? The name hit like a hammer to the ribs. I knew who he was. Everyone in the territory did. Railroad enforcer. Land baron. Collector of debts and daughters alike. They said he owned more judges than cattle. No, I said. I'm not with him. She didn't believe me. I wouldn't have either. I walked to the coat rack, took down the rifle, and laid it on the hearth far from reach, but not hidden. Then I stepped back. I don't keep slaves, I said. I don't sell girls. I don't ask questions I'm not ready to answer. She blinked at that. Just once. Do you have a name, I asked? A pause. Then Kiona. The name sat heavy in the air, like something sacred, something not meant to be said indoors. I brought her the cup of water again. She took it this time, drank slow, cautious. I shouldn't have come, she said. But you did. They'll come after me. Let them. We stared at each other a moment, neither blinking. I pulled the medallion from my apron pocket and placed it on the table between us. This was yours. She nodded. My mother carved it. Means truth doesn't run. I looked at it, then back at her. Well, I said, then maybe it's time we stop running. That night, I moved the rifle closer, bolted the door, because I didn't know who Preston Hale had sent, but I knew men like him didn't knock. They kicked the door in. Chapter 2. What if the paper that promised protection was written in blood? All along. It was the silence after Kiona's story that changed me most. Not the bruises on her ribs or the rope burns on her wrists, but the space between her words, the unbearable pause where something should have been, where help should have come, where law should have worked, but it hadn't. That night, after the beans were gone and the last of the orange light had slipped behind the ridge, I sat by the hearth with my hands curled around a chipped mug of coffee gone cold. Kiona lay curled beneath the buffalo hide, her breath soft but uneven, the carved medallion pressed into her palm like a talisman against nightmares. Outside, the desert whispered things I didn't want to hear. Creaks from the fence, a distant coyote cry, the wind shifting just enough to sound like approaching hoofbeats. I hadn't asked for this, but maybe I had somewhere deep inside. Maybe every prayer I'd ever said for purpose had been answered by her collapse at my fence post. I needed to know more. Not just for Kiona's sake, but for my own. I needed to understand what exactly I was standing against, because if Preston Hale had the power to brand girls like cattle and call it law, then the world I had obeyed all my life was far more broken than I'd dared imagine. Kiona stirred sometime after midnight. Her voice rasped through the dark like gravel dragged over wood. There's something I didn't tell you. I turned toward her. The firelight flickered across her face, half shadow, half reckoning. I didn't run just for me, she said. I ran to buy time. For the others. How many 11? Maybe 12. Depends who's still breathing. I swallowed hard. You saw Smoke Hollow? She asked. Did you ever hear about it? I've heard rumors. Men whisper its name like it's a saloon or a ghost story. It's neither. It's a place for people no one plans to return. She pushed herself up slowly, grimacing as she sat. They tell us we're indentured, that it's all legal, that our families owed money so we're paying it back. But no one ever pays it off. No one leaves. She reached for the medallion and held it up to the firelight. The bird design gleamed faintly blood-stained but defiant. They told me when Amy cousin was caught trying to escape, said she'd be made an example by sundown tomorrow. That's how they do it. They give you a deadline, then they erase you. The word erase chilled me more than anything else she'd said. Like Weena was a word on a page someone had decided no longer needed saying. They'll come looking, I whispered. They already are. We both turned our heads toward the window. The wind had changed again, carrying a new scent smoke and sweat and leather. Somewhere out there men were closing in. Not with torches yet, but with paper. And in this part of the territory, paper was more dangerous than fire. What do they have on you? I asked. A debt contract, she said, signed by a traveling magistrate blessed by a preacher who can't even read Apache. I was 13. They said I owed $60 for food and shoes. My hands clenched around the mug. That same preacher had married me to Thomas. I remembered his cracked voice saying honor and obey. I stood. Kiona looked up. Where are you going? To find someone who remembers what justice feels like before it was bought and sold. Elias Brandt lived beyond the arroyo past the last dry well and the rusting remains of a rail spur no one had used in decades. Once he was a decorated scout, wore a silver star over his heart, and rode beside General Crook himself. Now he was what the town called half-lost, part recluse, part drunk, part danger. I didn't knock. I just opened the gate and waited. It took him a full minute to open the door, shirtless and unshaven, a pistol in one hand and a whiskey bottle in the other. When he saw me, he didn't smile. "Clara Wren," he said. "Either I'm still dreaming, or the sheriff's wife came looking for sin. I came looking for truth." He stepped aside, and I entered. The cabin smelled of tobacco sweat and something older, like forgotten things trying to wake up. The walls were covered in maps. Not the kind sold in stores, but hand-drawn ones, scrawled with notes in Spanish, Apache, and blood. I told him everything. I didn't spare a detail. Not the bruises, not the threat, not the medallion, not the deadline. He didn't ask questions, just listened. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling like it might have answers. "I've heard of Smoke Hollow," he said. "Most men have, but they don't speak it out loud. Because if you do, you have to choose a side." "I already did," I said. "You sure that choice cost me everything once? Then you chose right." A long silence passed between us. Then he stood slow and deliberate and opened a trunk at the foot of his bed. Inside was a worn leather gun belt, a revolver wrapped in oilcloth, and a tattered cavalry journal. He buckled the belt around his hips like he'd been waiting for someone to ask him to remember. "You'll need more than me," he said. "I've got someone else," I answered, "and 12 reasons not to wait." He nodded. "Then you'd better ride before daylight," he said, "because if they're coming with paper now, they'll come with chains by dawn." And so I rode back through the hush of midnight, Elias beside me on his paint horse, the desert alive with whispers. The law wasn't broken. It was working exactly as it was built, and I was done obeying it. Chapter 3. What happens when you stand in the way of men who've forgotten what mercy looks like? The wind shifted just before they came. It always does if you know how to listen. Birds stopped singing, Birch started pacing the corral, and the coffee I'd just poured went bitter before it cooled. Kiona was still asleep on the couch, or pretending to be, her body curled under the buffalo hide, stiff like she could hear ghosts moving outside. I set the cup down and walked to the front window. 3 riders. 2 neat. 2 quiet. They approached in a triangle formation with 1 man ahead and 2 flanking behind. The lead rider had a rifle across his lap and a hat pulled low enough to hide the kind of eyes that don't blink when they shoot. One of the others looked barely out of boyhood. The third chewed a toothpick like it was someone's last chance. They stopped 20 feet from the porch. I didn't wait for them to announce themselves. I stepped outside, rifle in hand, the barrel low but my grip firm. The sun behind me painted a shadow across the yard, my silhouette longer than I felt brave. The lead rider touched the brim of his hat. "Mornin', Mrs. Wren. Heard you might have had company wander through." "This ain't a church picnic," I said. "Get to your business." He grinned at that. Not friendly. The kind of grin a coyote makes before it tests the chicken wire. "Name's Jarrow," he said. "Working for Mr. Hale. We're looking for a runaway. Apache girl. Violent. Stole something. We've got paperwork." He reached into his coat slow, like he wanted me to believe he had all the time in the world. Produced a folded sheet thick with official stamps and that same red wax Hale used like a preacher's seal. I didn't take it. "I've seen Barnes' name before," I said. "On land deeds, damn contracts, and death warrants. That paper don't hold water out here. It holds fire," he said, voice hardening. He looked past me toward the front window. "You see, when people hide stolen property, the law says they can be prosecuted too." I stepped off the porch. I didn't think. I just moved, placing myself between them and the house, between their dust-covered boots and the girl trying to breathe without shaking behind my walls. "She's not property," I said. "She's a child." His eyes narrowed. "She's a contract. Signed and sealed. You interfere, you declare yourself part of this mess. I already am." The youngest rider shifted in his saddle. Couldn't have been more than 19. Pale knuckles on the reins. Wouldn't meet my eye. His hand hovered near the butt of his pistol but didn't settle. I noted that. I always note the ones who might still have a conscience. "We don't want blood," Ma'am Jarrow said. "But we'll take her if we have to. You'll take nothing but dust." Silence stretched tight. The man with the toothpick spat and muttered something crude under his breath. Then came the voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. "Seems to me, you boys forgot how hospitality works in these parts." Elias Brandt stepped out from the barn-long rifle resting casual in his arms, but there was nothing casual about the look in his eyes. It was the look of a man who'd buried too many friends to pretend words still solved things. Jarrow's smirk flickered. "Didn't expect to see you, Brandt." "That's funny," Elias said. "I didn't expect to waste another bullet on cowards." He walked forward, slow boots kicking up little clouds of dirt, and stopped beside me. The memory of his hand brushing mine when we'd fed starving coyotes one winter rose uninvited. I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. "She in there?" he asked. I nodded. Jarrow tensed, realizing what the answer meant. "You really want to pick this fight, Elias?" "No," Elias said. "But I will. And when it's done, you'll carve your names into the fence so the next bastards know better." To my surprise, Jarrow didn't bark back. He studied me, then Elias, then the house. "You're making a mistake," he said, "one you won't live long enough to regret." "Then make it quick," I replied, "because the coffee's already cold." They didn't draw. Not yet. They turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Mounted their horses like men rehearsing a play they hadn't expected to finish. As they rode off, the youngest one glanced over his shoulder just once. His mouth moved like he wanted to say something, but didn't. When the dust settled, my knees buckled. Elias caught my elbow. His touch was steady, calloused, familiar in a way that made my heart ache and my breath catch. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know." Too late to back out. "I know that too." We went inside. Kiona hadn't moved, but her eyes were open wide and wet. The medallion was in her hand, clenched like a weapon. "They'll come back," she whispered. "They said fire next time I told her." She didn't blink. "They mean it." "I do too," I said. Later, when the lamps were lit and the chickens had finally stopped fussing, Elias sat by the window with the rifle across his lap. I stood behind him, staring into the dark. "I didn't expect you," I said. He didn't turn. "Didn't expect you to still care about anything." "I didn't," I said quietly. "Until she showed up." He nodded once. Funny what sets people back on fire. And though no one else would have seen it in that moment, something passed between us, something small and old and unfinished. Out beyond the fence line, coyotes howled again. But this time, it sounded like a warning. Not for us, for them. Chapter 4. What do you call a home that no longer belongs to the town that built it? The floor creaked once-twice beneath Elias' boots as he paced by the window. Kiona dozed on the couch, but every time the wind shifted, her fingers curled tighter around the medallion like it might summon something sacred or dangerous. I sat at the kitchen table, running my thumb along a crack in the wood, trying to remember if my hands had ever stopped shaking. "You think they'll come tonight?" I asked. Elias didn't answer right away. He had that stillness men like him wear, like armor soldiers turned ghosts, just waiting to be called back into fire. "They'll come," he said finally. "They just haven't decided how loud they want to be yet." I nodded. There wasn't anything else to say to that. I baked biscuits I knew we wouldn't eat. The smell of butter and smoke settled through the cabin, trying its best to make the place feel warm. But there was no warmth left, only waiting. Kiona stirred when I brought her tea. Her face was pale, but steadier than it had been yesterday. She was healing slowly, like someone learning how to live in her own skin again. "I dreamed of snow," she murmured, "but it was red." My hand paused midair. "Red like blood." She nodded. It covered the tracks. No one could tell who was chasing and who was running. I almost said something, but a knock came before I could. Not on the door, on the side of the porch. 3 sharp raps, soft enough to be human, but firm enough to mean something. Elias moved, first rifle in hand. I followed with the shotgun. Martha Sims stood there in her Sunday shawl, the one she wore to every funeral but her own. Her eyes darted toward the window behind me, then back to my face. "I didn't see anything," she whispered. "But folks are saying things in town. Preacher visited Hale yesterday. Came out pale as chalk." "What did he say?" I asked. She hesitated, hands wringing the edges of her shawl. "That Hale's got proof that if you don't hand the girl over, they'll burn you out and claim the land under forfeiture law. Old railroad clause buried in the fine print." My stomach dropped. "I brought biscuits," she added, lifting a small cloth-covered basket, "and I tucked something inside." I took the basket and found a folded scrap of paper beneath the cloth. "They're coming at dawn. 5 men. Sheriffs, one of them." I looked up, but Martha was already turning away. "Why are you helping me?" I called softly. She paused. "Didn't turn around. Because once years ago, you sat with my daughter when she lost the baby. You held her hand when the doctor wouldn't touch her." That memory crashed back into me, sudden and warm. I hadn't known anyone remembered. "Thank you," I said. Martha nodded and disappeared into the dusk. Elias was quiet a long while. Then he stepped close, not touching me, just near enough that I could feel the heat of him. "You should run," he said. "I won't. They'll kill you." "I know." His voice was gentler then. "You always did choose the losing side." I looked at him, really looked at the worn lines around his eyes, the pale scar by his jaw, the man who once left without goodbye but came back anyway. "Not losing," I whispered. "Just harder to love." A silence hung there, not cold, not sweet, just honest. He reached up and touched my cheek with the back of his fingers, soft as breath. "If we make it through this," he said, "you and me, we start again." I didn't say yes, but I didn't step away either. Later, Kiona sat beside the hearth, humming something old and low. I didn't recognize the language, but the melody braided itself into the room, a slow rhythm of survival. "What does it mean?" I asked. She glanced up, startled. I'd heard. "It's for the women who died crossing rivers," she said. "We sing it so they remember their names." I knelt beside her. "Will you teach it to me?" She blinked, then nodded. We hummed together until the oil lamp ran low. Before bed, I kissed the photo of my children on the mantel. I hadn't done that in years. Then I locked the door, pulled the table against it, and stood my rifle beside the wall. We didn't sleep much, but in the hours before dawn, something shifted. Elias handed me a silver locket I hadn't seen in a decade. It was dented and tarnished, but when I opened it, the miniature painting of a tree inside was still intact, the one he painted for me the week before the war took him away. "You kept it," I whispered. He nodded. "You buried it." I dug it back up. Outside, an owl called once, then again, then silence. We knew what that meant. Dawn was coming. And so were they. Chapter 5. What do you call a victory that still smells like smoke? The first light of dawn sliced across the horizon like a blade, sharp, quiet, inevitable. I was already on the porch, shotgun resting on my lap, when I heard the hoofbeats. 5 of them, just as Martha warned. They didn't hurry. Men like that never do. Preston Hale rode at the front, dressed in a black duster like mourning had been made fashionable. His boots hit the dirt slow and heavy, the kind of sound you remember in your spine. Behind him came Sheriff Dunley, face-drawn, jaw clenched, like a man trying to chew something that never softened. The others, deputies or hired guns, flanked them, silent as vultures. Elias stood just off the porch, rifle across his chest. He didn't blink when Hale dismounted. I stayed seated, let them come to me. Kiona stood inside the doorway, eyes alert, back straight. She held the medallion in her palm, thumb circling it like a prayer. "You know why we're here," Hale said, voice like syrup poured over broken glass. "Because you never learned how to leave things that weren't yours," I replied. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here on lawful warrant. That piece of paper you had forged won't protect you when this burns." Dunley shifted uneasily, eyes flicking toward the barn. "Let's not start something can't be ended, Clara. It already started," I said. "When you turned your back on the truth." One of the deputies stepped forward. Young. Nervous. Hale gave a nod. He raised his rifle. Elias was faster. One crack of the shot, not fatal, but enough to knock the rifle from the deputy's hands and send the other stiff. Dust danced in the rising light. "That's your only warning," Elias said. "Next shot, won't hesitate." Hale's face didn't twitch. He studied Elias, then me. "I underestimated you," You mistook silence for surrender. I'm offering you mercy. Last chance. No, I said. You're offering submission. I'm choosing memory. He nodded once, and they lit the fire. They torched the barn first, like always. Burn the tools, the food, the shelter. Control the flame, control the people. But fire doesn't answer to men like hail. Not anymore. I screamed to Kiona run. She didn't. Instead, she grabbed the shotgun and stepped beside me. I remember her face in that moment, still strong, lit by fire and fury. Elias moved like a shadow, dropped one man clean with a shot through the thigh, then turned toward the next. Gunfire cracked like lightning. Wood splintered. The porch rail shattered near my knee. I didn't duck. I aimed. 2 shots. One man fell. The other ran. Smoke choked the air. The barn groaned and collapsed in a chorus of embers. Hale stood by the well, watching, calculating, unmoved. Then Kiona shouted a sound more war cry than words and threw the second rifle to Elias. We pushed them back. They didn't expect us to fight like that. Not the preacher's wife, not the girl they called a runaway savage. Certainly not the man they thought had forgotten how to bleed for something. When the last of them fled, Hale was already gone. I don't know when he left. I only know he didn't look back. I dropped to my knees beside the barn's smoking bones. My palms hit the dirt, hot and sharp. I cried for maybe 3 seconds, then stopped. There wasn't time for grief. That afternoon, the sheriff came back. Alone. No badge on his coat. No pistol at his side. Just dust and a paper. I'm done, he said. With Hale. With pretending. He handed me the paper. A deed. My name on it. Signed, sealed, and more honest than any prayer he'd ever offered. I looked him in the eye. You came late. I know. He turned to leave. Before he did, he paused. Well, talk about what happens next. Maybe I said, but not today. Elias and I rebuilt the porch 2 days later. Kiona helped barefoot in the dust, humming the river song again, the one for women who crossed waters. No one else dared. Do you know what it means? I asked her. Yes, she said. It means we carry what the world tries to drown. She planted corn behind the house the same evening, said nothing, just dropped seeds, like prayers, and kept walking. That night, Elias sat beside me by the fire pit, smoke curling into the sky like a memory trying to forget itself. You still got the locket? He asked. I nodded, pulled it from my dress pocket. The tree inside still shone. I buried it once, I said. I know. I dug it back up. We didn't kiss, but we didn't need to. The next morning, Martha came with bread. 2 other women brought nails. A boy from the schoolhouse offered to help fix the fence. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. People remember the day Hale came with fire. But I remember the morning after, when the town chose not to stay silent. When Kiona laughed for the first time. When Elias let me cry and didn't try to stop it. When I picked up a hammer with smoke still in my hair and built something that didn't ask permission. Some victories come quiet. Some come with thunder. Ours came with ashes. But it came, and that was enough. In a world that's gotten so fast, so loud, and so disconnected, there's something grounding about a story like Clara's. Maybe it's the silence between gunshots, or the way a woman can stand her ground even when everything she built is turning to ash. Maybe it's because many of us sitting at our kitchen tables with bills stacked high or watching the sun rise a little slower than it used to, know what it's like to rebuild. This isn't just a tale of outlaws and fire. It's about choices made when no one's watching. About standing up for someone when it's easier to stay quiet. It's about the kind of courage that doesn't announce itself, but grows quietly in the bones over years of being underestimated. Maybe you've raised children who now walk their own roads. Maybe you've lost people or roles or titles that once defined you. Maybe you've spent a lifetime doing what was expected, and now you wonder what would happen if you finally listened to that quiet voice that says there's more. Clara's story reminds us that it's never too late to rewrite the ending. That protection and tenderness aren't opposites. That love can return after silence. That peace doesn't always come in a whisper. It sometimes walks in with a rifle and a steady heart. So if you've ever wondered whether the stand you didn't take years ago still matters, or if the one you do take now might ripple out into something greater, this story's for you. You've just heard one powerful story, but many more remain untold. Click to discover more raw, gripping, deeply human tales from the Wild West.